Test. All right. We are doing a super live, a double live. I think. We'll see who joins in. 3 watching. Hey. All right. Well, I am doing my very first YouTube live in celebration of 2 things. The first is this is the 1-year anniversary of this channel, and 2, because we've just reached 3,000 subscribers, and you know, tiny channel, not gonna have any misconceptions about that, but 3,000 in first year is pretty sweet, I gotta say. So I'm doing a simultaneous YouTube, TikTok live here and just celebrating. Yeah, first gen professor on YouTube. So thanks for stopping in. You might hear some mouse clicks because I think I'm going to also ask some friends to join in. And I thought the best way to celebrate would just be to kind of talk about whatever it is you want to talk about, whatever's on your mind about college, grad school, academia at large, scholarship, research, teaching, just anything and everything is fair game. And if I have something to offer, I'll try to offer it. And if I don't know anything about what you're wondering about, then I will definitely try to point you in the direction of someone who might, because there's so many wonderful, so many resources out there. So yeah, 1 year. I hope the setup, like the mic and the delay and everything, are all okay. I have a question via my TikTok channel. What pronouns I use? I use he, him. Thanks for asking. And yeah, just this past yesterday I posted probably one of my longest videos. It might be my longest, and that is about publishing from start to finish with a university press or an academic publisher. And that was a lot of fun to make because I didn't realize until I pressed record that I had this process baked in my mind. Like if someone just sat down with me at a coffee house and asked, how does it work? Like it's just second nature now. And when things become second nature, it's a good idea to commit them to some other form of, writing or whatever. So we have a question that comes via the TikTok chat, but I'll share it with everybody because this is something about teaching is always always repeat the question, especially in auditoriums. I learned that a long time ago. So let's see. I'm an undergrad, and I have had an awful academic career in my 3 years of school. Now I rediscovered my passion for learning, and I'm wondering if there is any salvation for me. That's a big word, but thank you. Salvation for me. And what do you think? Yes, undoubtedly yes. I don't, first off, I'm sorry that the first 3 years were like this, and you don't wish that upon anyone. And I don't want the next thing I'll say one thing that's going to sound a little bit condescending, but please know my heart is in the right place, and then I'll try to say something concrete. It is really easy in high school or in college to treat those 4 years and your surroundings and your world as like the entire universe. Meaning, so 3 of 4 years is 75%, and that's almost all of it. But life is long, inshallah. Career is long. Multiple transformations over the course of one's life. And I would never again wish 3 awful years upon anyone in their undergrad. But you should feel in some sense lucky that you actually rediscovered the passion, that you found it again. A lot of people lose it for much longer than 3 years. And so put out of your mind the idea that all is lost. And really the question I would be curious to know is, what is your passion, and what steps are you taking now to try to shelter it, nurture it? Because I think you now know firsthand that you can lose it, or you can lose touch with it. So no, there's definitely salvation. I would probably need to know a bit more about kind of what kinds of things you really work on to give more concrete advice. So I have a comment over here on YouTube from Guilherme. Congrats, Professor. Thank you for your videos. It helps a lot and gives us grad students some hope for the future in these bleak times. I'm so happy to hear that. And, one thing I truly hope is that the channel and the videos that I make, I really don't want to sugarcoat things, but at the end, I want to give very blunt and pragmatic, direct advice. But I do that because I have unflagging, it's not optimism, but I am unapologetic about how much I believe in this line of work, for lack of a better word. I think research is holy. I think teaching is magical. I think mentoring is one of the most challenging and rewarding things you can do, next to probably being a parent. And I am totally unapologetic about, just because sometimes there are a lot of advice. There's a lot of advice out there, but it can take the form of extremely disheartening, like all is lost language. And so how to strike a balance between advice that basically advises a person out of their passion versus giving advice that says, listen, I trust you're a responsible adult, and you've taken a look at the world around you, and you feel semi-confident to very confident that this is a potential home for you. Here is the best advice I can think of to how to build this home. But I'm really allergic personally to what I see as advice that, in my view, pulls up the ladder, like someone has made it to something, some stable place, and then just kind of shits all over the profession, or talks about how the dark days are coming, and that's all they say, and or how impossible X, Y, or Z is, and so forth. And I don't know. I know choreographers. I know chefs. I know people start magazines and journals, and I can't think of one of these professions. Music, my God, I can't think of one profession where it's like, oh yeah, you have a job waiting for you. Oh, you plan to play Tuesday nights at the club in hopes of like climbing the ladder and playing Wednesday night, and then maybe Thursday, and then maybe opening. Oh yeah, you have a secure job waiting for you. But at the same time, here you have someone who says like, okay, but I love writing music, or I love performing, and so how do we strike a balance here? Is something that I don't have a complete answer for, but thanks for saying that. I hope that I'm balancing that in this channel. Cool. So just peeking. So I have a question from the TikTok channel. In case anyone doesn't know, I also have a channel over on TikTok. And if you want to see what the other side is doing, so on YouTube, it's just youtube.com/Tom Mullaney, TOMMULLANEY. And on TikTok, it's First Gen Professor, all one word, lowercase. Had a comment, I enjoy university grad work, but not interested in doing the work for a PhD. Any thoughts on working on multiple masters? Well, I think the starting point for masters for me is cost and funding, because many master's programs are self-funded, and at least in the North American Academy, most PhD programs are funded. Like if you, it's hard to get in, but if you get in, you should have a full package of funding. Whereas masters, you may get tuition reductions, but you're paying for yourself. So I do believe that you want to be very careful if you're talking about self-funded masters of the idea of collecting them, doing more than one. Because at some point it runs the risk of becoming an extremely expensive pastime as opposed to a concrete way. I think a master's, in my view, is a way to build a concrete pathway, a bridge from where you are to another place you want to be, where there's a gap. It's not a chasm, but it's a pivot in your career, moving from one discipline to another. And if you just apply directly, you might not be competitive. Language training, if you don't have sufficient language training or some skill set. So for me, just one person's opinion, a master's is a way to build a bridge, but you don't need, to invoke the Buddha, like the raft is to get across the river. You don't want to carry the raft around on your back. So I personally would need to be convinced. If a friend of mine would say, I want to do multiple masters, I would say, convince me. I am not convinced. My predisposition would be to say I'm not convinced. Cool. Demid or Denko. I had a great first year of poli-sci, but my second and third, as the curriculum started to deepen in content, I fell behind and did not have the best performance in many classes. Should I retake my low-grade classes? If I do, what should I tell the professors who teach those classes? How can I frame this so that I can get into a good graduate program? Okay, I see what you mean. So you're in undergrad, strong start, then not to your satisfaction for second and third year. Well, there's a cost benefit analysis to do here. Maybe to put a possible conclusion first. And again, I'm operating under very, very minimal information here. So please understand that this isn't a strong piece of advice. It's like something to think about. Is if you are going to go the route of retaking classes in order to enhance grades and have one replace the other, first, you want to make absolutely sure your university or college's policy about what happens to previous grades if you retake. Like, you do not want to get to a point where you have retaken a class, done great in it, but both iterations show up in the transcript. Some classes at Stanford, I know, you can repeat for credit, and that's because the class title stays the same, but as every year the content changes. So a student is permitted to take that class more than once, and if they do, both of those classes show up on the transcript. These are things like major topics in blah, blah, blah history, and you just give it a generic name as a professor, and so one year I could teach intellectual and cultural history, the next time I could teach economic, but I don't change the name. You want to make sure that this isn't one of those classes, because then doing it again won't erase the grade. So that's one thing. And you can talk to I don't think you need to talk, your professor won't know the answer to this probably. You'd probably want to talk to someone in your department administration who handles undergraduate affairs. If it's a college, just the administrator, and they'll know. The other thing is, though, even if you could erase all your grades and retake, every class you are retaking, you of course lose the opportunity to take another class. Do not max out your credits and say like, oh, I'm going to do everything I would have done, plus I'm going to retake all these classes, because then you're setting yourself up quite obviously for a whole new round of failure, because you just won't have the time to do well. And so, that's a cost. If you not being able to take another class and having to retake a class is a cost. So maybe once you know whether or not a new grade will erase an old grade, maybe you could consider being extremely selective, like choosing one of these classes that you did poorly on, or two, but taking the hit for the others, and saying to yourself, okay, I'm going to have two hopeful A minus or A grades in my field, and then the other ones are going to be lackluster. But any new classes I take I'm going to commit to and not repeat whatever happened in the second and third year. I think that's probably a more honest assessment of what can be done with what sounds like a year's worth of time. But again, these are just sort of frameworks for thought. Most of my advice takes the form of frameworks for thought so that you can have a decision matrix in your mind. Awesome. It's so nice to meet everyone. This is really exciting. It's really exciting. Okay. How do I, this is from TikTok. How do you keep your optimism when the prevailing social consensus against the humanities is everywhere? Great question. Yeah. I'm not gonna say that it doesn't get to me constantly. There's a slide that I include in some of my history classes. The data is old, so I have to refresh it. But one day, I decided to do a basic web scrape to figure out how many students in a given quarter at Stanford were taking history courses, like any history course. And then the number was somewhere in the order of like 700 and change or 800 and change. I forget the exact number. There is one course in the CS department, computer science, that has more than all of the history courses combined, and it was Intro to Machine Learning. And I would make this joke that Stanford undergrads are more interested in self-driving cars than self-thinking people. That really pissed off the CS people, but I do the history of computing, so I quickly assure them that I have no, I'm not anti-CS or anything of that silly like that. But it is telling. 900 people in one class, and then in just one, and then that X minus that number minus 50 or minus 100 for all history courses. And then we wonder how we got where we are now. My optimism comes from a little bit of knowledge of the humanities and deep awareness of what it is. So the kind of dismissal that is true, that is widespread, I know is bullshit. So I'm impervious to the kind of silly arguments out there that if I was just starting, or if I was an undergrad, might get to me and might steer me away from it. But I know that we have supercomputer clusters that model climate and nuclear explosions and protein folding. There is no supercomputer cluster capable of modeling a year of human history, let alone a decade, let alone a century, let alone a millennium. We are molecules and particles that can decide to go left instead of right, even if the kinetics and the ballistics of our movement should, like, if we were billiard balls and we hit in a certain way and we should go left, we can just go right. And in fact, we can suddenly stand up and say, I am no longer a particle. I am a dabadoo. We can make up new words, and there's something extremely bizarre about sentience. And I'm not just limiting that to humans, consciousness, sentience. And so it's just like, you think astrophysics is hard? It is. History is harder. I'm sorry. And I will go toe to toe with anyone who thinks otherwise. And so that's one thing that keeps me optimistic. And here's the other. I know my undergrads know that. I know that once they actually really make the attempt to weave together and piece together even a basic narrative about based on firsthand research, they see how incredibly awesome it is, how incredibly hard it is, and how incredibly useful this skill set is. Even if they don't major, do something with history afterwards, and the vast majority of my students don't. So the students get it. And the economy dictates what most people are going to try to focus on and get jobs in. That's fine. That's the way it's always been. But my optimism is this. And this is not an affront to STEM. Again, I'm an historian of technology, an historian of science. I'm an avid user of technology. And I rely upon medicine. My brother's a doctor. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. But doctors are here to keep us alive longer. For what? Aspects of product design are here to make our lives more convenient or efficient. Unto what? None of these fields answer that question, and none of them pretend to. And if you ask anyone that seriously works in these fields, none of them know like top-notch, Top Gun ER surgeon. If you were to ask them, well, doctor, if you save their life, what should they do? It's like, I don't know. My job here is to open up their chest, fix it, and close them up without infection, with hopefully a minimal scar, and we're going to use like the most cutting, bleeding edge technology to do this. And I am trained like nobody's business. But the question of what they do if I save their lives, that is a question of the humanities and the social sciences. That's my optimism. And I know that students know this because I have many students who their first job out of Stanford is a tech startup or a consulting firm that does a lot of tech stuff. And then I'll get an email out of the blue, and it's almost like clockwork with a good percentage of my students. And they say, oh, hi, professor. Or we go by Tom after we graduate. Hi, Tom. I'm coming by campus. I'm visiting. Can I stop by? And I know that, yes, they want to see me, but also because they're thinking about grad school, or they're thinking about what they deeply miss about these other dimensions of their life in general. So my optimism is, yes, that people will always come home to history. They always come home to philosophy. They always come home to art history. They always come home to anthropology. They always come home to religious studies. They always come home. It might not be in my career, but they always come home. I'm a little bit blah, blah, blah. I'm so sorry. I'll try to be more economical. I apologize. Linus Chan from YouTube. Oh, now you're just trying to make me feel good. You must be a spectacular grad advisor, and it shows in your videos. Gina Tam, star, absolute star, told me wonderful things about you during her first year at Trinity. So thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. I'm trying very hard. I fail, and mentoring is this hard. Teaching is this hard, and research and writing is this hard. Mentoring is the hardest of all, because if it's real, you are with a person for, well, I mean, in the confines of the job, you're with someone for 7 years or more. But truly, if they stay within the academy, and not everyone does, and I support everyone in whatever decision they want to make, but if they stay in the academy, I consider my job is not over until that person has tenure. And so that's a 2-decade or more relationship. So and everyone is completely different. Gina is the person who taught me how to advise. because I was very young when I started. I was 27 years old when I got my job at Stanford. I was assistant professor at 27. I didn't know, you know, I had just a phenomenal amount of growing to do, still do, but had even more then. And I remember I made a comment to her in which I was trying to encourage her through comparison with like other people in the program about what they were doing. I don't remember exactly how I put it. It wasn't something as crass as like, why can't you be like your whatever, the kind of bad parenting that people do. Why can't you be like your brother? Why can't you be like your sister? Not like that, but it was something that had that flavor, I'm ashamed to say. And if Gina had just left my office without saying anything, I wouldn't know that it was completely counterproductive and completely useless for her. It wasn't just useless advice for her. It actually was not. It was actively not helping. And she, I don't know if it was at that meeting or after, I think it was immediately, she said, that doesn't help. Like, meaning not like you're a bad person or whatever, but my makeup is such that encouragement of that sort doesn't help me. And I just was like, it was like, duh. I was like, okay, I will never do that again. It's not like I had said something bad and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. It was, if that is useless to you, if that is totally counterproductive, I'm not committed to it. I'm just inexperienced and trying to help. Gone. And then I made it pretty much, and then I realized like, oh, it is completely useless to most people, so it's gone completely. Now there are some things that work with some mentees and absolutely don't with others, but you have to like figure this out as you are also trying to help someone develop subject expertise and methodological expertise. So it's a mixture of teacher and almost family member, a little bit of therapist, a little bit of self, almost like you have to be conscious of yourself. You have to be very careful as an advisor about giving advice, ironically, because you are an authority figure. And if someone is lost, Gina wasn't, but if someone were lost in their research, if their advisor says something really casually like, what about blah? Why don't you consider blah? And to them, it's just, I'm just tossing ideas out. It is very easy for someone that is lost and in the asymmetric position of vulnerability relative to say, I should do that. Like, I've been given a pre-blessed piece of advice from like the key authority figure. I'm going to do that or latch on to that. And maybe, so you have to figure out how to give advice in such a way that you're not putting your finger on the scale, I guess, so to speak. Cool. Let's see. Thoughts? Oh, this is from TikTok. Thoughts on taking medical leave from academia. Do it. I don't mean you. I don't know your situation, but if you arrive at the decision, then do it. I know many people who have, and it was absolutely the right decision to make. Of course, re-entry is challenging, not institutionally challenging. It's psychologically, personally challenging. But if one were to take a medical year of leave, whether it's for physical health, mental health, you should talk in confidence with you might even consider talking first with a relevant administrator in your department, as long as they are okay with talking in confidence, before talking to, I'm not sure if you're a grad student or a professor or a postdoc but in my view, it's a good idea to know what the institution already has built in before broaching this to, if you're a grad student, to an advisor, because the advisor is not going to know the ins and outs necessarily of how that works. And it's good to do your homework, know what's possible. And then when you walk in and have this conversation with an advisor, I'm just again speculating here, then when they say like, oh, I want to support you, I don't exactly know the ins and outs. You can say, well, I've actually done a bit of, fact finding before this meeting, and I know that I need to go to this office and sign this document. I need you to sign this or whatever, and that's what that's something that you could consider. But in terms of doing it, I think it's entirely something that people have at their disposal without hesitation. Cool. Ooh. Sorry about that. All right. So, do. Cool. Um, so yeah, I just let me have a sip of coffee here. Um, yeah, I'm just taking a little pause break, see what's going on. So actually, I'm so curious. Like, is the audio okay? Is the video okay? This is the I've done a few TikTok lives, and that's just obviously your phone and a earpiece. But this is sort of a bit more complicated, complex of a setup. Just everything looking okay. Anything you need me to adjust? And meanwhile, I will. What's my ethnicity? None of your business. Do I believe in God? None of your business. How did it feel when you graduated? That's a great question. I'm assuming we mean undergrad. It was. It wasn't a good feeling. I don't remember it being a very good feeling. Not because I did not like my undergrad institution. I went to Hopkins, and it just wasn't a good fit for me. Um, Maybe if I had had that strong attachment, like I had close friends who went to Hamilton, who loved it, went to Grinnell, who just like worshipped it. Um, when I was a grad student at Columbia, I met many undergrads who worshipped Columbia. And I never had that experience. As a grad student, I worshipped Columbia, but not as an undergrad, I did not worship Hopkins. And that probably played a part in it. But also, maybe in the absence of that, I think that graduation feels like whatever you feel like at that moment in your personal life, in your emotional life. And I think things weren't great in that world. They weren't great in realm of family. They weren't great in the realm of relationships. And then I did have extremely, and do have extremely close friends, best friends from college. They made college great. And I think the one saving grace, the one thing that made me feel peace of mind, is that by an amazing and awesome coincidence, my best friend got a job in New York City, and I got into Columbia. Well, I graduated early. I graduated in 3.5 years, and then I did a co-term master's. And while I was doing a master's, I got a job in DC, and I was commuting from Baltimore to DC. I hated the job. It was at a consulting firm. I hated it. Did not respect it. Like, I can tell you about that, but it's separate. And then I got into grad school, and I was so thrilled about that. But, I was leaving people. And then I found out that my best friend was moving to New York, and he proposed the idea of getting an apartment together in New York. And that was just pure magic. That was as much as getting into grad school. It was when he told me, like, I've got this job lined up. Do you want to do this? That I felt really happy, because in the beginning, I ended up loving and love New York, but when I first went, I did not. I had actually vowed early in life that I would never live in New York. My family comes from New York, And when I visited one time, I didn't gel with it. It was just overwhelming. And it took me a few years, but living with my best friend certainly took the edge off and made it really joyous. But yeah, I, I did not really enjoy the feeling of graduating, I guess. Hope that's not a bummer. Audio and video is good. Oh, great. Cool. Howard, hi. Didn't know today was a live chat. Yeah, I should probably let me go ahead and let people know that I am here. Let's see. And see if anyone wants to join in the fun. So I'm going to go ahead and send something out to my mailing list while we talk. Yeah, so it's a weird thing to say, but this is to the same this is a similar point that I tried to make before when someone was asking about 3 of the 4 years being pretty miserable and is all lost if I've just found my passion. And the answer is no, because I was extremely passionate in high school. College was I just made a video about this, in fact. It was kind of a bucket of cold water. And sorry. Celebrate 1 year of first gen professor. Okay. And whoa, gosh, I'm trying to do this thing, but it keeps slipping. I'm sorry about that. But then I went to grad school, and I when I went to grad school, then suddenly I felt pretty at home again. Like it took me a while to get at home in New York City, but Columbia was really a natural fit for me pretty quickly. And so, that's just the way it is sometimes. That is the way. You can tell I'm kind of blang in this way that's not quite helpful because I'm typing something. Let me just finish this and then I say, I'm live now on YouTube. Come join the fun. Celebrating 1 year of first gen professor on YouTube. Okay. All right, continue. And okay, send it out from me. Live chat now on YouTube. I'm live now. Okay, I'm sure this will get a lot of unsubscribes. People will be like, oh God, this guy again. But that's okay. Unsubscribes are okay. All right, that went out. All right, so Jan or Yan, hi from Seoul. Got to go to sleep now, but wanted to say thank you for your recent videos on book publishing. Motivates me to get back to my proposal that's been sitting there for some years. Well, I'm so happy to hear it. Yes. When you wake up tomorrow, do it. Here's a trick. Just spend 5 minutes. Like I have this timer, this 5-minute timer. 5 minutes is a unit of time that anyone can do. Just like look at it for 5 minutes and then just literally don't look at it anymore. I bet you'll want to look at it more than 5 minutes, and then next time you can let yourself look at it however long you want to. Oh, you got the email. Zhu Mingxi got the email. Cool. So Howard, the cover letter was really, really useful. Crossing my fingers, Tom would be sharing the one he applied for U Chicago and not Princeton, Harvard. Yep, I will send it. It's still early morning here, so I promise to. All right. Okay, let's see. Oh my gosh, we've got a lot of messages here. I am so sorry. Okay, let's see. Let's see over here on TikTok. Okay, we're back there. All right. 20 years work experience, MBA, MS, MA. Is a PhD a good idea? This is from Kevin O over on TikTok. Again, absence of information, so you know that. Like, you give me one line of data. My gut, my stomach gut says when I meet someone who has, if I met someone who had a PhD, an MBA, MS, MA, and a PhD, I might think to myself, oh, there we go, then I can prop it. I might think to myself, is this person a degree collector? And there are such things. I'm not saying you are, but there are such people as degree collectors. And collectors are cool. Otaku are cool in my book. But graduate PhD admissions committees are really good at spotting degree collectors, and it's an application killer. And every now and then, it's not super common, but you might get like one or two in an application cycle, and you can tell when someone wants to kind of add it to a list rather than needs it for something. I think PhDs are for things, and if you have something in mind, then by all means. If it's the thing itself, that's when I caution against it. So not knowing, I would have to put it that way. Ake says, 老师好. Hey, 早上好 over here. How did you know that you wanted to go for a PhD? So for a very long time, my primary idea was journalism, and I've always been obsessed with like the printed word. When I was a little kid, I mean, like 7, I would go to photocopy, or maybe 8 or 9. I would go to like photocopy places and make my own newspapers and pass them around my neighborhood and get subscriptions, typically about environmentalism. And then in high school, there was a high school paper, but I didn't really like it, so my friends and I started our own. And then I've always really enjoyed, I don't know, like, put it this way, when I do a conference or when I make a class, and an administrator says, oh, we can do the flyer for you for the course, or we can help with it, I'm like, no, I want to do it. I love that stuff. Like when I was a kid, I used to ask my mom to take me to office supply stores. There's like I don't know, there's something about staplers and paper clips and Rolodexes that just I love. But then I remember a really disheartening conversation. It's sort of vague in my memory, but I went to a panel discussion. I think this was at Hopkins. And it was a group of foreign correspondents that, one person was from the China desk of maybe the Wall Street Journal or New York Times or whatever, and then another person was the Russia desk or whatever. And I was there, like so many students, to try to figure out how do I become you. And what was extremely disheartening is that every single one of them had the same story, which was, I had no intention of becoming a foreign correspondent. I started out on like police beat, and then they got routed to sports for a few years, and then and then someone got hit by a bicycle and broke their toes, and someone needed to pick up send to Seoul, and they asked me, and then 10 years later I woke up and I was like, oh my God, like what every one of them is describing is not a reproducible phenomenon. And that made, I don't know. And the other thing was, I still applied to journalism school, and I got into the Berkeley School of Journalism, and I'm super excited. I had a meeting with the author of Cadillac Desert, and I was considering like documentary journalism, and I got in, This is a master's program. The same time I applied to PhD, and I promised to get there. But I saw the list of who got in, and every single one of the students on the list had been the editor of their school, of their university newspaper. And I was, or like they then a disc jockey for 4 years, or was the president of the ham radio club. And I was still using photocopy machines to make zines and newspapers and things. And so I felt really like a fish out of water. But more importantly, and this gets to the point of PhD, is I've always been drawn to research, and it takes me a long time to figure out what I think about things. And so I knew I needed something that would allow me to do research and writing in my career. But I also came to the conclusion when I was deciding between Berkeley and Columbia, Berkeley for a master's program and then Columbia for a PhD in history, was which of these temporalities suits me. And I realized that I'm also introverted, so thinking back to those foreign correspondents who said, at first I was covering weather. I cannot go up to someone who just lost their home in a hurricane and stick a mic in their face and say, how do you feel? Like I know it's a silly wave, but there's a lot of crap journalism jobs out there that involve that kind of, starting point. And I'm not good at that. So that was a big decision. But even before that, writing is something I can't live without. Research is something I can't live without. And then turns out I really came to enjoy teaching. I didn't know beforehand. And you don't need to love teaching to get a PhD. There are plenty of fields where you're not necessarily doing a whole lot of teaching, or any teaching at all in some fields, in some STEM fields. But yeah, it was a realization about my own makeup as a person that made it very, very likely for me to do that. So try to take two here. We've got Lin Fang Liang. Professor, would you mind to sharing your opinion about how important for each RLPS related experience, CGPA, etc. in application? This is useful for you because I don't know what RL and PS mean, but I know CGPA. So if you could tell me that in the chat. GPA, if you're talking about for graduate programs, I can, in this case, only talk about my own experience. And what I would say is, in the admissions meetings that I have been in, there tend to be very little discussion of GPA, except if, and more towards the statement of purpose, the letters of recommendation, the fit, and with maybe the exception that if someone has extremely bad grades in the field that they want to do a PhD in specifically, like those courses on the transcript, that might be a little bit of a red flag. Like if someone has a D in Java or Intro to Java, but like A+ on Intro to History and Historiography and advanced topics in modern Chinese history, whatever, but then a C- in biochemistry because for a moment they were planning on, being pre-med or whatever, that's not fundamentally of concern for me. If this person has D- in first year Chinese, second year Chinese, third year Chinese, and got a C in a course on modern Chinese history by a professor I know, then that, of course, that's a major red flag. Because then it brings up the worry if they have the depth that they really need to succeed. And I don't care if someone has bad biochemistry grades. And of course, if you have a bad biochemistry grade, that affects your GPA. So it's less of the number itself than a more fine-grained reading of the transcript of the individual grades, in my experience. Now, there could be math programs medical programs, whose first their culture, admissions culture, might be cut anyone below X, Y, or Z. So my statement is not universal. It is extremely specific. And I would say that you would want to ask the same question of the specific field you're considering. And if you can find ways to ask someone in confidence, not your potential advisor, don't bring this up with them. But if you know someone who has gone there or taught there or teaches there or whatever, if you can ask someone in confidence what their, how this factors in their world, then that's going to be way more useful than a generic answer from me, I would say. Hey teacher, when does class start? Oh, it did. You're late. What do I teach? Well, I'm a historian. I teach the history of modern China, history of, global history, history of technology and science, and also history of race and ethnicity. Right. Do, do, do. Oh, oh. Well, this person is attempting humor. It's so sad to see attempted humor. Okay. New to the history of science, thinking about the technological sublime, any book recs beyond nine. Oh, so many. If you send me a message in TikTok, I will send you some reading suggestions. It may take me a little time, but lots to suggest. Lots and lots. Oh, okay. Back on YouTube, RL, recommendation letter. Sorry. PS, personal statement. Okay. So a tip to everyone. Never make assumptions about acronyms. I have never in my entire life seen recommendation letter shorthand RL. Never. For me, the insider language is rec letter, which is equally opaque if you don't know it, but rec letter. Recommendation letters are immensely important for applications to graduate school. Immensely important. Personal statement, immensely important. I would say personally, in my, again, narrow band of experience, recommendation letter, personal statement, in my experience, are more important than just straight up GPA. So this is a question from Ake on YouTube. I have a question. I feel like I'm missing out a bit on the life milestones my high school classmates are celebrating. Kids, house, car. But I am finishing my master's next year at Penn, and I want to do a PhD. I know exactly what you mean. I know exactly, or my version of exactly how you feel. So I'm not sure if you were here, how long you've been hanging out, but I mentioned that I moved to New York with my best friend from college, and he went into banking. He was an econ major, went into banking, and I went into a PhD in history. Whose salary went up, do you think? And this is why this person is my best friend, is because he just doesn't care about these kinds of distinctions at all. He just is him. But anyway, when we lived in this kind of tiny 2-bedroom apartment, I was mugged once, but I'll put it this way: when I went away for dissertation research in my third year, so if you do modern Chinese history, you eventually go back. I've been to China many, many times, but you go back to China for a year typically, or maybe 6 months to a year of dissertation research. At that point, he said to me, so Tom, I think I'm going to find another apartment. And I totally understood. We had to give it up anyway because he didn't want to find another roommate, but it was his opportunity. And he moved, he eventually moved in with his fiance, who was another best friend from college. They actually met on their freshman hall. It was one of these like amazing storybook romances. And he was still in New York. I would go up and watch The Simpsons with him every Sunday. We'd like cook dinner together and stuff. But his life diverged, where our lives diverged in terms of these kinds of things, you know, savings, putting away for whatever. He got, he got married, and I was his best man, and no car because it's New York. And yeah, there's no doubt that it crosses your mind, and you do think about it. But um, I do think that life can have a way of evening things out. And now I have a car, family, kids. Don't have a house because we don't. I mean, I live in one of the most insane places on earth when it comes to real estate, but I don't. I don't think of those days in those way because I loved and love what I do and what I was doing, even in many of the hardest moments. And so I made a TikTok about this, and it was so misunderstood that I eventually deleted the video. But what I tried to say, and probably failed to say, was thinking about kind of the sliding doors of like what if I had gone into the private sector or something, versus this. It's natural, totally 100% natural to think about that and to feel this comparative distance, especially as your friends diverge. And all of my high school friends, same deal. I don't know. I know one high school friend who went into uh, an advanced degree. Totally natural. But if you're thinking about it all the effing time, resentfully, constantly, measuring, calculating, and I mean like daily basis, there is a moment. I'm not saying you're doing this. I'm saying I met people that do this. That's a sign. That's a sign, maybe, that this is not what you actually want. Not can't do it, can't cut it, can't soldier through, that kind of nonsense. But quite literally, there are people that enter PhD programs who don't want to be there. And they find out, and hopefully they find out sooner than later. But when someone doesn't want to be where they are, often the signs are very indirect and metaphorical. And that's one of the ways, in my experience, that it can show up. And, but yeah, no, I completely understand how it's a totally human sentiment. So thank you for telling me that. I'm going to have a sip of water here. What time is it? 10:49. Okay. Nice microphone. Thank you. Do I speak Mandarin fluently? When I've had a few drinks, then I think I speak it fluently. What's my favorite science fiction book? I'm not super extremely well read, so it's not like favorite as if it's curated. Opie Hotline is pretty awesome. I really like that. The first of the trilogy of Three Body Problem is amazing. But okay, degree collectors are okay in my book. Great. Harmless, not harmless. That slot, the slot that one holds, especially if one gets funding, means that it doesn't go to someone else. So It's not harm, but it's not zero. It's not a completely budget neutral decision. Masters, go for it. If someone wants to collect masters, which are self funded typically, like go to town, go to town. I'm a big believer in complete lifelong learning. Like I teach in this program called Continuing Studies, which is about either retired professionals, people still in their profession, but just want to take a course on modern Chinese history or the history of information technology or whatever it is. And they are the most committed students I have ever met, at least in kind of lecture settings, because they really want to be there. I'm a French grad student in the US. What is it like working on Chinese history as an American? Um, it's getting weirder and weirder. I would say it's getting a little bit more challenging and more politicized. This is the most politicized that it has ever been in my life and career to be an historian of China from the US, definitely, in terms of access, not interpersonally, not like my colleagues and friends from China, but archival access, um, this sort of nationalistic pedagogy that is being advocated in the PRC. But, by and large, I mean, I've been going to China for 23 years now. And I haven't gone in a while because of parenthood. But even with all of the unbelievable changes, it's always been an amazing experience to go and teach. I've taught in China many times at People's University or Tsinghua University, just as a guest, Yunnan University. But it's getting a little bit, the temperature is kind of increasing in ways that I don't particularly enjoy. Yeah, I have another TikTok channel about modern Chinese history, and the comments are just, some of them are just certifiable, like on both sides, hyper nationalism and just rabid xenophobic anti-Chinese racism. And then the two sides of these just horrific comments will just fight for like days. And they have nothing to do with the video. The video is like about X, and they're suddenly talking about, and eventually someone will say something that just completely crosses a line, and I have to block, and it's really sad. Um, I don't know. I don't. If TikTok had existed 10 years ago, I'm not sure the comments would have looked like that, but there's no way to know. And I would say, so I find the distance productive. So I think you're also asking, you're French and you study US history. I'm American, I study Chinese history. What about that distance? I think that distance is incredibly analytically, interpretively productive because history is about making familiar things strange and strange things familiar constantly. And so people that grow up in a particular culture, in my case, American culture, there are things I don't even notice that it takes. My wife is from Italy. She'll say, this is completely messed up. Have you ever thought about how messed up X, Y, or Z is? And that's literally something that I have known just the way it is. So that's incredibly productive. And that's what I do in the context of Chinese history. And similarly, something that I think is very weird about the US, let's say, someone from another country or another situation might say, there's nothing exceptional about this. Like, this phenomenon is totally true where I'm from, and I know of X, Y, or Z. And that, there are dangers, there are pitfalls. You know, there's something that comes with just being steeped in a place and knowing the memes and the references and the illusions, no doubt. But that familiarity also comes at a cost to interpretive possibility, I think. Do I like listening to Jordan Peterson? Not at all. Do, do, do. Love your content. This is from TikTok. Really appreciate all the work. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks so much. Oh, okay, so looking at my... Oh, hey, cool. Hello. Uh, could I share my experience in supervising, mentoring students? What kind of approach would you recommend that would maximize student potential? By the way, congrats on the 1-year anniversary. Thank you so much. So mentoring styles vary dramatically. I mean, I'm just talking about my colleague and me. I'm thinking of one person in particular. I won't mention by name. I've had PhD students go on to, become professors, write books, and have all these sort of benchmarks of success. I've had some leave academia, but in other successful ways. I've had people leave programs. So there's a variety. Same thing with my colleague. Totally different mentoring styles, utterly different. So my view on mentoring, it's not a philosophy, it's just kind of how I do it, is modeled on I haven't seen this person in a long time, but my therapist. I'm a big believer in therapy, so I feel no hesitation about using the T word. But one thing that you need to do is create and hold space. This is a common way of putting it. Create and hold space for your advisee. You have more responsibility than they do in the relationship, in that conversation. Is that you're creating a zone, a space, and then your job is to keep that space intact so that they can go through all of the many things that they're going to go through as a scholar, as a human, as a student, a human being on this planet, all of that stuff. And you've got to hold it. And holding that space is really hard because you're human and they're human, and you get excited, you get impatient, you feel like you have the answer, and you want them to have the answer. You feel like you've heard them make the same excuse before, whatever it might be. You can't indulge. You shouldn't indulge any of those. Except sometimes you should. And this is the weird, how do you make the decision? How do you know when to hold the space, and then every now and then to intervene and call bullshit or point out that the person's trapped in a cycle, and that whatever it might be. And that is a very different relationship than if you're just grading papers for a student you'll have in one class and you'll probably never see again, or for a student who is completely uninterested in doing professionally what it is you do, which is most students. Most students don't become professors of history or anything having to do with history. They go on to do whatever they're going to do. So, and the other part about holding space is that it allows you to figure out how they need to be advised. There is no one size fits all for advising any more than there's one size fits all for being a parent or a friend, I would say. And in my sort of pecking order of who gets a response by email first, second, third, first people to get a response from me are my advisees. I'm talking professionally, are my advisees. My advisees get faster email responses than like senior colleagues. The next is a student in my class. The third is, and then it goes down from there. But if you are considering admitting a PhD student, no, it is an incredibly big commitment you're making, and just treat it that way, and just know that you're gonna learn how to advise over the course of the relationship. You're not gonna know when it starts. Cool. All right. Let me just see. What are we celebrating? We are celebrating 1 year of First Gen Professor on YouTube over at www.youtube.com/Tom Mullaney. But I thought I would do a live in both venues, both TikTok over here, YouTube here, because I've never done a YouTube live before, and to be honest, I wasn't sure if anyone would show up, so I didn't want to be all by myself. But there are actually 37 people on YouTube and only 7 on TikTok. What's going on? I'm kidding, but this is very cool to figure out how to do this because I'd like to start doing this more. So what I am gonna do, and this is always uphold your promises to your partner, is I scheduled in our family calendar 10 to 11 was this celebration live. So this is to say I'm going to wrap up in a little bit, but I just wanted to ask everyone, if I didn't get to a question or a thought, please leave it in a comment here or in a comment, actually in a Q&A over in TikTok. I think Q&A is better than comments because comments get lost, so that I can come back to it. And I really appreciate you coming, like more than you might think. And I want to make good on you coming and try to offer any whatever I can. The other one is, if you are not subscribed, please do. And I try to make videos on YouTube every week. And I try to make about 3 or so TikToks or 2 or so TikToks each day over here. And yeah, the whole point of this channel is just to be helpful. So anything you want to know about, I'm happy to ruminate on with you. If I don't know, if I have nothing to offer, I will tell you I have nothing to offer. Or if I only have a sliver of advice, I will tell you. And if I said something today that you found useful and you feel like, oh, he already answered my question, please still put that in the comment. And same thing over on TikTok, because I will, if you found it useful, chances are at least one other human being might find it useful. And so I will make another video about that, or at least involving that. Because again, time is precious. So if something was useful, it'd be nice to share it with other people. But thank you all so much, and I think I'm going to jump off, and hope you have a good rest of your day.